that'll bring your net worth to what, zero, right? Essentially, right? Because you got to cancel out that debt based on your net worth. But if you got income and you're making $30,000 a year, $50,000 a year, now that income represents your net worth because that's going to be a positive balance, right? So, debt is also your liabilities, whatever lifestyle costs that you have, right? If you want to get to it. And then the last one I'll add in there is your sources, right? So how many sources of income and how much do those make? Now, if anybody on here, there's plenty of people here today that only have one source of income. We talk about multiple sources, but the reality of it is most people only depend on a job, right? So $50,000 a year is not hard to obtain. How much is that per month? Let's break this shit down because we're going to get to the skills in a second because right now we're just talking about paycheck and time, right? When we get to the skill set, the game changes completely different. That's when your time becomes completely different. The way you view time, the way you view life becomes different. While you're on a mechanical 9 to 5, right?
So that's about 4,100 a month.
You said how much?
200 a month.
Okay.
4,200 a month for 50K.
How much is that per day? So
per day?
Let's do 30 days.
All right. So that would be divided by 365. So let me 4,200. You said per day, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. I don't know why it's not letting me add it. 4,200 divided by 365. Hold on, let me do it one more time. Just Google calculator.
Now, this is what you got to understand, right? Because we go talk a little bit about the problem and talk about solutions and solves, right? And this is something that your family can use for the rest of their life, right?
Right.
So, the earning a middle-class income does not guarantee middle-class economic security, number one, because there's so many other factors that go into it, right?
So that's 100 and per day, 50,000 divided by 365 is $137.
All right. So you gotta make $137 per day.
Right.
Right. We're not forgetting about taxes. That doesn't have to be calculated into this at the moment, right? We talking about income. We're not talking about net right now, right? So we talking about what you can actually produce, right? Which is very.
Then you gotta ask yourself, brother. We just saw that it takes $137 to make 50K a year. So somebody got to ask themselves, what can I do in one day to free myself from my job to get me over $100 a day? So that's first and foremost. People say, okay, how do I quit my job? How do I free myself from my job? The only thing that I found 5-6 years ago was trading. I was like, okay, I can make over $100 a day trading. You get what I'm saying? But you got to be comfortable with that. See, a lot of people get greedy and want $1,000. That's why traders lose, because of the greed and the oversizing, right? But there's plenty of ways. I saw something on, they said it takes 4 hours to make $100 driving Uber. 4 hours.
And this is the important part, because what the poor class do not have and what the middle class do not have, which is the most important thing that the wealthy class do, is time. The most important thing that separates the differences is time, right? So you have to understand that if you are in the poor class and you don't have your own time and you can't control your time, you don't even have time for education, right? You don't have time to heal. You don't have time to rest, relax. You don't have time to be creative, right? All of these things are necessary in order to live a certain quality of life, right? So even when we talk about, okay, you have to drive a car to get money, all of that time in between that you could have been using that time for, right? That's life. That's completely different, right? So, think about how much time it takes. And this is where we at in this new AI economy, right? And you have to understand, in the skill economy, people are afraid of their job being disappearing, but people that have skills are not afraid of their skills disappearing, right? But more importantly, creative thinking, emotional intelligence are very important, right? So think about this. You have a job And if you don't know how to manage your time and your energy, somebody else has to manage your time and your energy for you. So they determine how much your time and your energy is worth, right? So they say, okay, if you work this job and the average black man makes 42,000, every black woman makes somewhere around $38,000, $36. That was an old statistic, but it's still close to where it is today. We're talking about average, right? Um, Now, if you need somebody to manage your time, then they can tell you what your time is worth to them, right? So, hey, I need you to work for an hour. That hour is only worth $14. That hour is only worth $17. That hour is only worth $20, right? So that's a cap on how much you can make with your time. Your time, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work, in that space of time, it will never go beyond that. Now, you're going to be waiting for a raise, and you're thinking you're actually making money. Let me tell you a story. I quit or fired my job one time because they offered me a raise. Now, it sounds counterintuitive, but I was sitting at the door and I was working. At the time, I was working security a while ago. And the manager came in. His name was Johnny. He walked in and then thought he was cool. He had a trench coat on. It was cold outside. Tried to walk up to me like he was shy. He talking about some Keys. He must have just sensed the disappointment in my mind. He said, Keys, I'm going to give you a raise. He said, we go up your $1.10. And I'm listening to this nigga tell me this shit in my ear. And I just had an epiphany. And I'm thinking, and he kind of like just walked off. And I said, did this nigga just offer me $1 for my time? You know what I'm saying? Like, it forced me to evaluate how much I was worth in that moment. And at that moment, I swear to God, he if he ever, out there, he tell you the story. I told him, I texted him right after that. I said, you got to find somebody else to cover my shift because I'm gone. And I left. And I never came back to that. Right now, right after that, I had got an offer to go work somewhere that was paying me 3 times that much. Right? You understand me? But most people don't know how to value their time. So when you know who you are, it becomes different because I already know what I could do with my time. You know what I'm saying? So I know that in this hour I could learn this, and this hour can be worth infinite. And so this is where you got to get to understanding how much your time is worth is depending on what you know and what you're willing to do with that skill set, right? So I fired them ASAP-ish, you know what I'm talking about? And then I started working another job that paid me $100,000 per year, right? Because I had to learn the skills. I had to learn how to sell. I learned how to sell. I was able to get commission. Then I thought about it, right? Because the brother talked about taxes. They take a certain amount of taxes. I thought about it. I said, wait a minute. What if I work for myself? If my skill set is worth millions to them, because I was selling millions of dollars for them. I said, if my skill set is worth millions for them, how much is it worth to me, right? So I said, well, if I fire them and work for myself, I'm sure that I can make that much for myself, right? So I went from a job to a business, right? And then when we talk about trading, and this is why it's important when we talk about trading and skill sets, even within, that job, there was a certain amount of cap. You understand me? The business is not capped off, but you can't just explode without certain things and parameters set in when you're talking about growth, right? So when I got a skill set and I started a business, I made my first $100,000 in a month, right? So I went from $100,000 a year, $100,000 a month, to when I learned how to trade crypto, I had my first $100,000 day, right? Now, this is not telling you these are the results that may happen, right? But if I didn't have that skill set, the possibility of me making that within a day would have never happened, right? And what I'm telling you is how valuable my time became. It went from a year time that I thought was $100,000
Kind
work, and I was
it's kind of breaking up a little bit.
you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. It's probably like a connection
Yeah.
thing, but like it'll like go in and out sometimes. Just so you're aware. But now they can hear you though.
So just to wrap up that point, man, it went from my year was worth 100,000 to my month was worth 100,000 to my day was worth 100,000, right? And so, like I said, I'm not telling you that this is some magical results. I'm just telling you the mindset on how I was able to see reality completely different, right? And I was working for somebody that was paying me $10 an hour, right? And so, the levels of life, the gain that you get determines, the value that you can proceed and create and produce, right? So when we talk about, your income, your skill sets, your education, all these things matter to determine how much your time is worth. In the poor class, the one thing they don't have time, and everybody determines how much their time is worth. So we're trying to give you a long-term mindset. I'm not telling nobody they're gonna make no $100,000 in a day, right? At all, whatsoever. But I'm telling you the possibilities, because I know for a fact on your job it's not even possible. It's not even possible, right? The possibilities change when you determine your time and your energy and what it's worth. Intellectual property, right? When you get a skill set that can't be unlearned, you have that value for the rest of your life, right? That means you learn something that they can't take away from you, right? So now you've increased your value just based on your skill set that you have, right? So how
Let's
much
talk
is that
about.
worth?
So let's brainstorm on some skill sets that you believe that. Okay, so let me ask you this then. Let's just say, what skill sets would you recommend to if you had a son, right, and your son was like, Dad, what should I do? What would you tell your son? Like, what skill sets would you tell him to acquire to make sure he doesn't have to go get a 9 to 5, in your honest opinion?
All right, that's a good question. Um, and here's the thing. Getting a 9 to 5 is not a bad thing if you get it for the right reasons, right? Like for me, number one, and this is what y'all want to understand about jobs. Most people don't use jobs as a ladder and a stepping stone, because you go to a job to get an education. You don't just go to a college to get an education. You learn about yourself, right? Because one thing he gonna have to learn is a work ethic. You know what I'm saying? If he don't have a work ethic, then it don't matter. He can't do nothing. So I had a lot of jobs in my life, and I had great work ethic. My pops told me the same way you sweep the floor, you know what I'm saying? You got to do that shit with mastery, because your habits, you understand me, is going to bleed into everything else that you do, right? So if you are lazy for somebody else, what makes you think you're not going to be lazy for yourself? Because you developed a habit, right? So you have to be careful when you're doing something and you don't do it at a master level, and then all of a sudden you think you're going to switch over to being a master when you're working for self. So if you're a poor employee for somebody else, you will be a poor employee for yourself. So work ethic is the number one thing that he will have to develop, because otherwise I won't believe him when he say he want to do something and I know how much it takes, right? So, critical thinking is number one for me. If he doesn't know how to critical think and analyze reality and situations, because that's where a lot of my value comes from, being able to think, right? Being able to analyze situations, being able to strategize. Strategy is important. So if I take a step back, strategy means it's like playing chess. I can look at the field. AI comes, right? Instead of asking people, hey, what do I do? I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to say, wait a minute, what's the history of it? How did this thing come about? What's the cycles when new technology comes around, right? He got to have the ability to strategize and research. And then I'm going to teach him not ask people and follow other people. I'm going to teach creative thinking, right? Because for me, most of the skill sets lie in the way that you analyze the world, right? I've been able to have the success because of the way that I look at the world and the way that I view the world, right? That's number one, right? And then learning strategy means that life is a war, right? But you learn a way that you can go about looking at things and doing things every single day, right? You learn the way of things, right? So for me, it's about critical thinking. It's about creative thinking, right? Then he got to learn salesmanship, right? Salesmanship is still one of the highest paying skill sets in the world, right? Learning how to, communicate and sell something is key, right? Like if my son, learns how to sell, then he can be of value to anybody in the world, right? Because so let's say Aristotle is a multi-millionaire, which he is, making all the money, and I come to you, Aristotle, and I say, hey, listen, I'm the greatest salesman in the world. And that means I automatically have a value to you. So you're going to say, okay, well, if you sell my product, I'll make you an affiliate or something, right? So all of a sudden, he goes and he analyzes the value that you've created, and he figure out a way to sell it to people that need it, right? So now he is making value for you, right? And he's creating value for himself, right? Branding, not just marketing. Most people market. Most people don't know how to brand, right? A brand is a completely different thing than a marketing, right? Marketing is really, think about what it is. It's a market. You're telling people that you're in that market, right? But brand is your true reputation. It's an art that goes along to the way that you are able to create a brand that has a reputation, right? That has an archetype, right? That has a personality to it, right? So him being able to create a brand gives him the opportunity to be able to create a community, to create business industry around that, and he can take somebody else's brand and take it further. So if I pass him down a business, I need him to innovate. I don't need him to do the same thing that I did. I need him to take a look at it and how do you take it further, son? Right? And content creation. Content creation will change in the future the way things will be done, right? Because AR, VR, spatial reality, AI, but at the same time, whatever that whatever the industry of content is, you need to learn how to make it. Why? Because you can't sell anybody anything unless you get their attention, right?
I'll tell you what I tell my son. I always thought of this because you know I got a son, so it's like he only 3 years old, but I've been mentally preparing myself on how I'm gonna try to make it to where my son can survive without me. Because one thing I see is a pattern within the rich communities, no matter white, black, whatever. Some people, not all, struggle with setting their kids up for a path without needing their parents, correct? So
Yeah.
if I was to give my son some advice, of course I would like to pass down businesses to him, but I already got things in my mind that I'll say, son, here are things. Of course, by that time, I probably already have properties, all that stuff. I plan on giving my children residual income, like streams of income that they can't fuck up on. So let's just say I got some rental properties, and I'm like, look, I got $5,000 cash flow right here. Here's yours, 5,000. So I'm gonna set my children up for that, but I'm only going to give them cash flow type things. So that's my job as a parent, right? Now, second, I want to tell my son, like you said, content creating is one. I would definitely let them know you have to learn the skill of video editing, content creating. That's first and foremost too. Because you want to be able to advertise your own product. So in need, if you have an idea, you need to know how to make this product go, just like 19 said. Two, of course, stock investing. Being able, as long as you have the skill set to know how to turn a little something into a lot, you'll always succeed. So that's something I would pass down to my child. Generational knowledge on stocks and teaching him long term, like this game right here. Like, son, I gave you cash flow. I gave you $5,000 a month. All right, cash flow of these rental properties. Right. So in my daughter, I do the same thing. So $5,000 a month. If you invest that, son, with a 10% return, so you don't use the money I give you, in 14 years, you'll have 1.7, son. So you don't want my money. I gave you cash flow. I gave you $5,000 a month of cash flow. Invest it, son. Put it into dividend stocks or a high yield savings account. Do something with that. But don't use my 5,000 to live. Use it to invest. All right. And you need to go make your own money. You get what I'm saying? So I plan on just teaching him so many strategies of like I would say stocks, content creating, video editing. What's another skill I would say him for? IT, tech. So tech, him learning. He don't have to learn coding, but you will have to go learn some tech. So tech's like whether it's app development, whether it's something, just make yourself valuable and useful. But investing is a must. Period. Like in my household, you have to learn how to invest. Uh, content
And
creating, I
and
would
not to
say
cut
video.
your wisdom, but when it comes to it, like, and this is the thing you gotta understand about children, right? And you understand about yourself. Each child is born with a set of genetic code from each parent that makes them unique. So there's certain things that they're going to automatically be wired towards. Your job is to get that child to be self-aware about what's inside them and who they are, from not from who you want them to be, but from who they already are from a genetic code aspect. So it's like saying, if you were born and you didn't know your parents, let's say Michael Jordan is your father, and nobody ever put you in front of a basketball before, right? Nobody ever put you into sports. You wouldn't even know that you were athletically inclined, right? But if you knew that was your father, you may pick up a sport just because you know that that's in your DNA. Then you go find yourself good at it. And it's gonna make you feel good about it. Then it's gonna make you pursue it. right? With a passion. Doesn't mean you go stay there, but you know yourself. So understanding your parents help you understand what's inside you, and then you get to add things on top of that based on how you develop yourself, your talents, your gifts, and your skills. So I teach my son, number one, understand your personality type, understand your intelligence type, understand your design type, understand your parents, understand the world and the time that you're living in, what cycle we are in, right? And this is important because the world goes through cycles. So, you know, when you are able to identify the cycles, now you're able to strategize and make move according to what you need to be doing